Welcome. You're listening to the ISACA podcast. I'm Safia Kazi, and I'm the Privacy Professional Practices Principal here at ISACA. I'm really excited to be joined by Justin Rende, who's the founder and CEO of Rhymetec. And in this episode, we're going to be discussing some cybersecurity trends for 2025. Justin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Safia. It's nice to be here.
So looking at 2024, what was the top thing that was keeping cybersecurity professionals up at night?
I think there were a few things, but I think one of the top things that kept people up at night is overall lack of cybersecurity talent in the field. I think that we're constantly kind of looking for people to match what the industry is kind of putting out there in terms of needs and some of the different vulnerabilities and threats that are coming in, finding people that understand that work and finding people, frankly, that understand kind of cloud architecture, as most of these companies kind of migrate off of on-prem into cloud and understand how to build security programs with cloud architecture. I think there's a true lack of talent in the space right now. And I think that that's really keeping some of the cybersecurity professionals up at night. It's how do they staff and manage some of the responsibilities that they have in front of them at this point in time.
Yeah, so on that note, what we've seen is that cybersecurity jobs can be really stressful. What advice do you have for retaining the qualified talent that may already be on your team?
Pay them well. I think you have to pay your employees what they deserve. And I think that there's a large void, I think, in this industry. And so people know that they can, frankly, leave their jobs and go to look for other places that will pay them a competitive salary. So I found here at Rhymetec that we need to pay our employees well and pay them industry or above industry averages to keep them here, because there's such a demand out there. So I think kind of compensating them and making sure that their jobs are also fulfilling, that they see a path forward in their roles, and that they're getting what they want out of their day-to-day jobs is one of the main ways to keep people here. Whenever I interview anyone to come work at Rhymetec, obviously outside of just comp, one of the conversations I have with them is really what do they want out of their job, and I try to really align some of those goals with some of the things that we do here at Rhymetec, so they see longevity and that they want to continue working at working at Rhymetec. So I think really just kind of the basics: compensation, employing people, but giving them a good place to work and showing them that they're appreciated, I think is a big piece of just keeping people in the jobs. Also, I think that from a executive level, a lot of CISOs are feeling a lot of pressure because they're not getting the budgets that they need in order to really kind of remediate a lot of the efforts that they want. So I think from a CISO level, it's really kind of or an executive level, it's understanding that you need to fund security. Like, it's not something that you should worry about after the fact. It's something that if you want to get ahead of it, when someone lights a match, you want to get ahead of it at that point. You don't want to wait until your house is on fire. And so really kind of providing that funding and realizing that you need it up front to attract and retain good talent, as well as to kind of fund the sort of services that your department needs, I think is a big piece of keeping people in the industry and keeping people with your company.
Yeah. Now, I know you kind of touched on this when you were answering the first question, but what are some of the skills that are most needed among cybersecurity professionals today?
Well, Rhymetec, we primarily work with cloud-based companies and SaaS-based companies. So I find that getting a lot of certifications with a lot of these cloud architecture companies, so AWS, Google Cloud, GCP, and Azure, are important pieces to kind of understand the architecture. I think before you are able to really provide a good secure architecture, you really need to understand that architecture. And I think that there are a lot of people still with cybersecurity knowledge that understand a lot about on-prem. But I think that gap is really where the cloud-based knowledge is, because it's relatively newer technology. And I think that we're catching up to that. But really understanding cloud architecture, I think, is the first piece of being able to secure it. And so really, when we're looking to hire people here, or we're looking to kind of find people that differentiate themselves, we look for people that have a lot of certifications around cloud architecture. That's actually something that I typically put at this point before I look at any sort of security certifications. We can get those for people, but I'm looking for people that understand how to build and how to build an infrastructure in AWS or in Google or Azure, I think are important pieces to find.
Mm-hmm. So if we could talk about the elephant in the room that it feels like everyone is always talking about, AI. How has AI shaped the role of cybersecurity professionals and affected their day-to-day work? Or I guess, has it affected their day-to-day work?
Yeah, I think there's been an onslaught of kind of, especially in the niche that we work in, of AI companies that are popping up, right, that are developing AI, either applications or whatnot. And there's no real security frameworks. I mean, they just came out with the ISO 42001, which is a framework based on AI, but there's not the depth and complexity of all the other frameworks that we have for non-AI sort of systems. And so I think kind of adapting to that, looking at ISO 42001 as kind of a baseline framework to keep these systems secure is important. I think there is a huge onslaught, though, of AI companies, and as it relates to just AI security companies as well, that are able to kind of provide some sort of artificial intelligence around how to remediate vulnerabilities, how to kind of detect vulnerabilities before they actually turn into a problem. I think that's also an area of AI that's helping and sometimes even hindering security, because as our controls continue to progress, so do the threats continue to progress. And I think that's both happening through AI.
Mm-hmm. And then, in your experience, are cybersecurity professionals using AI, or is there the potential to incorporate AI tools in their work?
I think it's been a pretty slow adoption of using it. I know at Rhymetec, we're pushing it here pretty hard because we work with pretty innovative companies that are using AI, but kind of alluding to what I said earlier, there's been a slow transition of people just working from like on-prem into cloud architecture, and understanding how to secure that. And I feel AI is kind of being the next step there. So I think where there's less people that are able to kind of work in the cloud architecture, there's even a smaller amount of people that kind of understand AI as it relates to, as the security as it relates to AI. And so I think kind of focusing and putting a lot of money into those two areas of security, AI as well as cloud-based security, is going to be an important step for us to continue to evolve as an industry, and us to continue to provide robust security scalable programs to these companies.
Mm-hmm. I know a lot of people who are working in cybersecurity are at organizations where people may have already adopted generative AI tools, and they're now kind of trying to develop a policy after these tools are already being used. What are some considerations that cybersecurity professionals should make when creating a policy around the safe and secure use of AI tools?
I really think if you are using any sort of generative AI tools within your organization, looking at the ISO 42001 framework and some of the baselines that the policies are required within that framework are an important piece. I think this is really the only piece of kind of, or the only framework we have that directly relates to AI at this point in time. And so I think using the baseline sort of policies that are in that framework as they apply to AI systems is an important first step in securing that infrastructure. I would say that any company that is looking at any sort of generative AI tools, either uses them or is developing them, that should be the first thing you're really looking at. You should skip over SOC 2, you should skip over ISO 20001, and you should really look right at ISO 42001 as kind of the first thing that you're looking to implement.
Mm-hmm. Then if we could shift gears a little bit, it seems like in recent years, ransomware has been a really big concern, especially for boards of directors. What are your ransomware predictions for 2025?
I mean, ransomware, I think just over the past year is up around 20%. Breaches from ransomware up over 20%. I always tell everyone that it's much easier to hack a human than it is to hack a machine. And so I think this is going to continue to grow. And I think ransomware is going to become more sophisticated. Again, as AI evolves, ransomware and those threats that can be associated with AI are going to continue to evolve. There's now more than 150 ransomware families out there. So kind of groups of different types of ransomware are out there. So this sort of area of threats and vulnerabilities that's coming is really something that I don't think people pay as much attention to. I think that really we should be focused on ransomware. It is the number one cause of hacks. I mean, if you look back just through politics, through any sort of major company that has had any sort of breach, it's largely originated from a ransomware attack. And so I think the fact that the industry continues to kind of deprioritize this and make it not the number one thing that we should be focused on is a huge mistake, because I think, like, again, it's data shows that it is the number one way that people are kind of getting hacked and having security incidences are through these ransomware attacks. And yet we funnel more money into kind of trying to put in controls on machines and less about actually training some of our employees how to identify and spot a ransomware attack.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Can you talk a little bit about the state of security awareness training? Are organizations doing a good job with providing it, or where is there room for improvement when it comes to securing people?
Yeah, so I think, well, I mean, as a lot of baseline frameworks for security, so SOC 2, ISO 27001, they require a level of security awareness and training to your employees just in order to hit these sort of framework goals or standards. So I think that like they do provide training. I think what the problem is though, is that there's a lot of sort of companies out there that provide just kind of standardized training that goes across the board and you're supposed to all sit through this exact same training when people and companies have different sort of threats and different sort of things that they need to address. And so I don't think training is really a one size fits all thing as it goes to security. I think that what we need to look at is each company that we work with or that's looking to invest into training, we need to understand why, what their threats are. We need to build customized training for their employees around those threats. At Rhymetec, for example, if we work with companies and like they don't even have a password manager, they're not using, we'll train everyone. Okay, like the basic sort of thing that you need to do is implement a password manager, and then we'll train them how to use that. I think we've all sat on automated trainings before where we're going through that training, but we're also on another screen doing our actual work and pressing a space bar every 3 minutes or whatever so that the training doesn't time out. I think also having the training live instead of just machine based and calling on people, making it interactive is much more of an effective way to train employees on security. So customized security for the actual companies and what their vulnerabilities and risks are, and then live training, I think are two big pieces that we kind of need to revert back to because it's, like I said before, it's not really a one size fits all solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And then if we can look kind of broader globally, I want to talk a little bit about hacking critical services, cyber warfare, but even just, the growing number of medical related devices that are connected and could potentially be hacked. What do you anticipate in this space in 2025 as far as cyber warfare goes, or even just connected health devices?
I think it's just going to continue to grow. I mean, as we have more devices that are connected to the internet, that creates more of a chance for people to exploit those devices. And so I think this is something, again, where we need to focus on it. Cybersecurity is not going anywhere. It's just going to continue to grow as our reliance on computers and systems and the internet grows. So cybersecurity, it's going to grow because that creates more opportunity for more paths of attack for malicious people that are looking to exploit that. And so we need to continue to kind of grow with the industry. We need to focus on the Internet of Things. How are we going to start securing those medical devices? I mean, there's some regulations around HIPAA and data privacy around medical information, but a lot of that medical information resides in these devices. So how are we going to actually start to secure these actual physical machines rather than thinking about it just from an internet perspective? I think that's a large gap, to be honest with you, that we're not paying attention to. I think that right now, we're focused. I think a lot of these startup companies that are coming out and creating a lot of these sort of innovative products, their focus right now is to become SOC 2 compliant or to become ISO compliant right off the bat. And they're doing that because they potentially don't have a ton of funding at that point in time, and they have to go to market with their product in order to either get more funding or to actually become profitable themselves. And then they look to invest in security, I think, at that point in time, where I think we need to start looking at security from the ground up and building it into everything. And so realizing kind of that it's an investment that you need to make early on, and you need to secure these things early on, these more innovative products early on, because if you do have a breach, it could be the end of your company before you've even really gone to the market.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. I think a lot of security professionals, especially in these startups that are just rushing to the market and want to be the first and the best, might struggle to make the case for security by design. What tips do you have for them to explain to senior leadership why security by design is something that should be considered?
Yeah, I think that it's just much more expensive to go back and fix something or change the architecture of something to adapt to the security controls later on when you have a little bit of more funding to be able to afford that. So I think you need to start building it from the ground up, and we should stop looking at certifications like SOC 2 and ISO as a check the box sort of thing so that we can go to market with our product, and actually realize that like we need to spend time, money, and effort into building these frameworks in a more robust way, in a more scalable way, in a true to secure way, rather than just trying to get through it as fast as we can to make sure that we've checked a box to appease our board or to appease our investors or to appease our customers. I think that like we need to start building it in from the start, and we need to realize that it's really yes, it'll enable you to go to market, and it will enable you to enable sales, but like the purpose of security isn't to enable sales. The purpose of security is to secure your product, so that when you are selling your product, or you have gotten to a place where you're much bigger and you have a lot of application and a lot of data, that you have the confidence that it's going to remain secure, rather than risk the fact that you have a breach, and that could, like I said, that could have huge impacts on your company down the line.
Yeah, for sure. Now, switching gears, you know, we are both in different time zones. It's important to understand that a lot of people are working remotely. What has the impact of remote work been on enterprises' cybersecurity practices?
Yeah, I mean, well, not everyone's sitting behind a firewall typically within their office and sitting on an internal network. Everyone is remote. Some people are working from coffee shops. I remember when I first started Rhymetec, back in 2015, I didn't have an office and I was working from coffee shops. I would get on a VPN whenever I was doing anything there, but I think that's sort of kind of common knowledge of like, how do we secure remote work? It's out there. We have the abilities to do that. I just don't think a lot of people have adopted that. I think that I looked at a stat and the other day, and it was like less than 10% of users who work remotely or work from coffee shops or something are on a VPN, and they don't understand that that exposes all of your data when you're working from a public Wi-Fi. So I think really encrypting your data, getting on VPNs, sort of making sure that, again, since you're not behind a firewall, phishing attacks or ransomware attacks are going to be probably one of the ways that you're going to be exploited. So understanding that, training around that, and putting in the correct controls that we already have, but actually implementing a lot of those security and technical controls like a VPN, and training your employees on how to use those right off the bat is a good first step in securing a remote workforce.
All right. So the work of a cybersecurity professional looks like it's just going to get harder in 2025. What advice would you have to people who might be listening to this who work in cybersecurity and are feeling a little bit burned out?
Well, sometimes I think that's actually me. So my advice would be that to stick with it. I mean, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I think that everyone should be focused on what's the next thing for cybersecurity, and not maybe get so hung up on controls. Understand that like just do the best that you can do to secure your environment with the funds that you have, but also be able to articulate the value of cybersecurity to your board, to people that'll be funding your department essentially. Because the more money you have, the better resources you can hire, the more controls you can put in place. And I think that kind of changing, if we as all cybersecurity professionals can go and change these sort of C-suites interpretation of cybersecurity, and that it's not a sales enabler, it's something that, yes, we'll also do that, but that's not what should be running it. We need to think of this as actually something that you do need to spend some money on, and articulate why you need to spend money on it. I think will help stage the industry where we can start working with the resources that we need in order to be less stressed out all the time, and to build and maintain successful InfoSec programs.
hmm Any predictions on cybersecurity budgets in 2025? I know you're saying a lot of it requires having the right resources in place, but do you anticipate cybersecurity budgets increasing, decreasing, or kind of staying the same over the next year?
Unfortunately, I think they're probably going to stay the same, because it seems that based off trends, the companies don't really take it that seriously until they do have a reason to take it seriously. So I think that I think at the enterprise level, some of these budgets may increase just based off of data and understanding that like, hey, a breach can actually really affect my company and take down my company. But I think on the mass scale, I don't think we've kind of gone to the peak of the hill yet of explaining and being able to articulate why we need to spend more money on security. I think that's half the battle. And so I think that a lot of the budgets will stay the same. I think that we're going to continue to have more breaches. We're going to continue to have more controls and innovative products built into the market. And I think as that grows, I think cybersecurity budgets will grow. But I don't see that happening really on a huge impact in a way that it really changes the impact over the next 12 months.
Yeah, it's really tough with cybersecurity because a lot of times if everything is going well, there's not really a, concrete metric to point to. What are some of the metrics that cybersecurity teams can keep track of and show to senior leadership when trying to explain the value of cybersecurity initiatives?
I mean, just explaining the how the threats and how the breaches have gone up, I think should be reason enough. Like I said before, we have 20% of ransomware attacks that's up year over year. So that's something good. I think Gartner predicted that 85 percent of organizations will embrace a cloud methodology by 2025, which is up from 2021. So understanding how to maintain cloud architectures are a really big piece of this as well. And understanding that, like, if we go to a cloud architecture, that changes what our security posture may look like, and so we need to invest in that as well. And then looking at AI attacks, I think, again, as I mentioned before, the attacks are going to continue to grow, and they're going to become more sophisticated through AI. So understanding that how we need to combat those attacks as well is with funding. Unfortunately, like, it does come down to money and innovation. So I think, like, putting money into the professionals and into the right controls to be able to kind of cut these attacks off before they happen is an important piece of this. I don't believe in selling off of fear at Rhymetec. That's just not how we sell things. We don't want, hey, if you get breached, everything's going to go under. It's not my methodology of how we work here. But I do think there's just a level of education with this, saying, hey, these are the risks that you're taking by not investing into this, and having that go all the way up to people that are actually control of the budgets and control of the money. Not stopping at, like, explaining it to a security engineer or even the CISO. If the CISO is getting their budget from the CEO, then we need to explain that to the CEO or to the board members or to whoever has control of those funds, because it's not going away. And to your point, I think a lot of these people just view it as, if it's not a problem, I'm not going to invest more into it.
All right. And then before we wrap up, is there anything else you want to share about some of your predictions for cybersecurity in 2025?
Again, I think really just, like, looking ahead, I think we should see quite a bit of technological advancements, especially around AI with this. From a venture capital perspective, we work with a lot of Silicon Valley startups. There's a ton of money being poured into AI, and there's also money that will be poured into cybersecurity AI. I think from a venture capital perspective, maybe not from a corporate user perspective, but from a VC perspective. And I think building these companies is going to be something that we're going to see a lot more pop up over the next year, the next 2 years. I think over the past couple of years, we've seen a huge rise in these sort of compliance automation platforms. And I think that's something they're going to also start embracing a lot of AI as well. So seeing them embrace AI and grow their capabilities are going to be an important piece of what we see growing over the next 12 months.
All right. Thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you.
And that's all we have time for in this episode of the ISACA podcast. But if you want to know more about some predictions for cybersecurity in 2025, be sure to click the link in our episode description to read Justin's article. Thanks for listening to the ISACA podcast, and we hope you'll tune in again soon.